I warmly welcome Professor Elisa Morgera, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change. She will provide a keynote right at the beginning. And then I warmly welcome to our panel and the discussions that we have with Honorable Dr. Meiner Thalir, the Minister for Home Affairs, Climate Change and Environment from Tuvalu, a well-known friend to us for climate activists and NGOs. He supported this work already for 10 years. And Dr. Katharine Braun from the Lutheran Church of Northern Germany. She's speaking here on behalf of the ACT Alliance Reference Group on Migration and Displacement. And of Christina Wegelein. She's the head of Climate and Security Division of the Federal Foreign Office in Germany. The direct and indirect effects of climate change drives displacement through extreme weather events and slow onset changes, representing a significant form of loss and damage, particularly non-economic loss and damages. Displacement disrupts life, livelihoods, and cultural identities, leading to both tangible and intangible losses. These include threats to fundamental human rights such as life, health, food, water, and housing. Non-economic loss and damage from displacement often involves impacts that are difficult to quantify, like loss of social cohesion and cultural practices. Understanding this interconnection is crucial for developing comprehensive strategies to address climate impacts, protect human rights, and ensure that outcomes for affected communities. Current assessments often underestimate the full scale and consequences of displacement. So please, Professor Elisa Morgera, would you please come here and present your keynote?
Thank you so much, colleagues. I think this is a really very important conversation we're having, where there's actually a lot to demystify, I think. And sometimes we see how the terminology that we use in the international climate process may actually be a bit of a barrier for fully understanding the impacts of climate change, their repercussions, and what may be more helpful approaches to respond. And I think maybe that very definition of economic and non-economic loss and damage might not quite convey the complexities of, first of all, distinguishing what may be economic and non-economic damage, but also somehow might downplay some essential loss and damage experience, which really affects and has impacts both for the full range of human rights, but also for the full range of climate action, from loss and damage, really reflecting back to what we need to prioritize in terms of mitigation and adaptation. So this will be the leitmotif, I guess, of my brief opening intervention. Just to place it in context, I think it's important to reflect around how climate-induced human mobility is projected to increase significantly. In fact, as much as climate change itself is projected to increase. At the very start of this COP, there were 2 global reports showing how big is the gap between committed action to mitigate climate change and the action we need to avoid climate chaos by 2030. The gap is enormous. And so what that means is that while we need to do everything we all can to see that more serious, more proportionate, and therefore much more ambitious climate action to really match the needs to mitigate climate change. At the same time, we also need to put a lot of efforts and connect as much as possible understanding and resources and enhance collaborations to respond to the increasing impacts of climate change that will be witnessed. And within that, really taking as much learning and responsibility as possible for the fact that those climate change impacts are felt disproportionately by the states, the communities, and the peoples who have least contributed to climate change and who find themselves in most vulnerable situations, often for reasons that are beyond their control. And I think that's the context in which to understand loss and damage, and particularly how what is understood as non-economic loss and damage is actually the key and kind of what we need to prevent first and foremost, because this is where we have the, I think, more profound capacities for resilience and for survival of people and the planet. And so I'm thinking about the work that also my predecessor, Ian Fry, did as first UN Special Rapporteur on climate change and human rights. In his report on loss and damage, he made a really important clarification, which I think is not yet fully central in climate decision making here at the international level, but also in regional and national decision-making processes, which is the loss of cultural heritage, the loss of territories and ecosystems, terrestrial, freshwater, and marine, is a crucial loss, which actually undermines the capacity of people and the planet to continue to mitigate climate change, in fact, to regulate climate change as they've done all along, but also really prevents the opportunity for people to be able to protect the full range of their human rights and to be able to survive in a changed environment. And so that connection, I think, understanding how the full range of human rights, but particularly that engagement with economic, social, and cultural rights, and the human right to a healthy environment, is really a lens that allows us to think, I think, more deeply about those areas of impacts that maybe are not receiving either as much attention, but also may need more cooperation internationally, but also regionally and nationally. In terms of working with different communities of practices, I'm thinking about colleagues, experts in cultural heritage, and particularly intangible cultural heritage, colleagues who are experts and research the benefits of nature to people, including the climate benefits that nature provides, and really understanding how that loss and damage to ecosystems, which has been also documented as a result of climate response measures, not just because of climate change. And so these are essential findings, as I said, to really rethink what are our priorities in climate mitigation and adaptation. And wherever we have the documentation of negative impacts on culture and on ecosystems, we really need to see that as part, the core of the evidence base for any further decisions on mitigation and adaptation, as much as on loss and damage. Something else I would like to add is also how in this conversation on loss and damage, maybe there still are diverse views as to the role, the applicability, and I think the usefulness of relying on international human rights law to navigate the evidence, to navigate the implications, to understand also international responsibilities, to prevent, to minimize, but crucially to remedy, to loss and damage. I know this is a key point of discord among countries represented in this forum, but I think it is important again to see how that the human right to an effective remedy is again such an important lens to really think about what is the most meaningful contribution the international cooperation can make. Where can we respond to the most dramatic needs of those whose human rights have been most negatively impacted, and through that being able to protect everyone else so much better and be actually more effective in achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement, but of the many other international treaties whose the objectives of which are also undermined by climate change. And I'm referring here to the advisory opinion of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, which was issued this year in April, and which clarified state obligations on climate change on the basis of the law of the sea. So again, going back to the point around the loss of marine ecosystems and negative impacts on protection of the marine environment. Again, not many people, I think there's some regions in the world who are very much, and representing of this panel, of course, who are very much live and breathe that connection with the oceans and how important it is for climate change. But for the vast majority of the international community involved in climate change, the ocean is a newcomer, and we're still wondering whether or not and to what extent climate action and in what terms climate action needs to happen on the ocean, and how much we can prevent, minimize, or remedy to loss and damage related to marine ecosystems and ocean cultures and ocean-based livelihoods. What I want to maybe mention as well in kind of closing in this, giving a few broad brushes of what I think are things that are not central enough in the conversations here at this COP, is that what the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea said is that whether or not states think that they are in compliance with their international climate obligations by being in line with what the Paris Agreement says, there are many other relevant international obligations, and states may not do enough in terms of climate mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage beyond what maybe is expected of them by the Paris Agreement because of the need to protect also those other interests, such as human rights, culture, the protection of the marine environment that are increasingly and dramatically affected by climate change. So my final point of reflection would be how important it is to look at the broader areas of international law, of guidance, and of evidence in understanding loss and damage, also from the perspective of the Convention on Biological Diversity, from the perspective of the law of the sea and a new agreement we have on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, because all those are elements of our human culture and experience, and all these are parts of the living planet we live in that have make already huge contribution to climate regulation, and we just can't afford for those to be further lost and damaged.
Thank you so much, Elisa Morguera, for this keynote. Thanks for setting the scene now for our panel discussion. We say goodbye to you, and we're very grateful that you have been with us. Thank you very much. This applause is for you. So there are some seats available in the first row. If you want to take a seat, please come take a seat here. And I open up now the discussion. And I will start with you, Maina Talia, Minister for Climate Change in Tuvalu. I think it's the first time that Tuvalu is having a minister on climate change. Is that right? No? You're not the first minister on climate change. Good. So, but it is a very crucial topic in your country. You yourself, also in other capacities, when you were part of the civil society of Tuvalu, have been fighting for years to incorporate non-economic loss and damages in the UNFCCC negotiations for good reasons. The human right to a healthy environment is severely threatened in Tuvalu, same like the right to live a life in dignity is also not guaranteed with rising emissions. So what is your country asking for? What are the people asking for? Why is it so important for them to address also non-economic loss and damages?
Basically, first and foremost, allow me to acknowledge the invitation that was extended to me to be part of this very important dialogue, especially around the area of non-economic loss and damage. As you may all be aware that Tuvalu is only 26 square kilometers of land, and it's not more than 2 meters above the sea. It's a low-lying atoll, and it's to the north of Fiji. Our culture, our language, and our land define who we are as people. And because we are facing the challenge of climate change related sea level rise, it also challenges our way of life. And our way of life is basically based upon communal living. We do things communally. Everything we do is centered around the community. We live as a community, we dance as a community, we eat as a community, and we mourn as a community as well. And yet people are starting to move because of climate change, because of climate-related issues. And of course, the introduction of the Falepili Agreement, an agreement that was ratified between Tuvalu and Australia. And there are three major components of the treaty. One is to look into climate change pathways. Secondly is it's on security. And the last one is on sovereignty, around sovereignty. So our role as government is to facilitate the movement of people. Facilitate in the sense that we provide safe and secure mobility of people. We are not encouraging people to leave. Our government stand remains the same as previous government. We do not encourage people to leave. We do not, but people have the choice, the freedom to choose whether they want to leave or not, whether they want to participate in these labor mobility schemes or any other form of scheme. But the role of the government is to ensure that people are safe and those pathways are secured for our people. The reason why I'm mentioning this because it has a lot to do with our culture and the likely loss of language, the likely loss of our culture, especially those who have been living in New Zealand, born and raised in New Zealand and Australia or any other parts of the world. There is always a tendency that we will likely the tendency of losing our language, our culture, because of climate change. And because we cannot quantify it, we cannot put a price tag onto it. It's a major problem, let alone the economic loss and damage. But when it comes to intangible values, things that we cannot carry with us to New Zealand or to any other parts of the world, so by losing those cultural heritage, cultural values, it literally means that we are losing life as well. The notion of the media been telling us that, Tuvalu in the next 50 years or so will be submerged. I coined the term creative lie. It's a creative lie. It was a lie that was created because we already been submerged. Some of our small islands have already been gone. The submersion of the Pukesavilivili and few other islands in the Pacific. It's literally telling us that we are facing this problem and need to be addressed in a timely manner. The biggest question we are facing now, if Tuvalu completely submerged because of climate change related sea level rise, who will take ownership of that piece of area? Because there is no international law that tells us or give us the right to take ownership of such if we are to relocate and live in New Zealand. So the question is, can we live in New Zealand or Australia and still take ownership of that piece of area in the absence of any international law? It's difficult. So we are also struggling how to comprehend and how are we going to address the issue at hand. But of course, the likely loss of culture and language, it's difficult for us, especially for people outside. When they come to Tuvalu, they look at migration as an option. It's no longer safe to stay in Tuvalu. You need to go. For us, who were born and raised in Tuvalu and continue to live in Tuvalu, it's not an easy task. It's difficult. 2015 that was during Cyclone Pam. Majority of the graveyards were unearthed in the island of Nui. And I was telling my colleagues, this is the greatest message that our ancestors are telling us. If you want to leave, please do not leave us behind. Take us with you. So when we talk about the non-economic loss and damage or the non-economic loss, it's not an easy task for us in the island. Living on this strip of islands, it's not easy. Because when we talk about human mobility or climate mobility, we're not just simply talking about transboundaries. We're also talking about people in Tuvalu moving further inland. And the questions are being, it's just a strip of land. How further can we move inland? So been to Tuvalu. So she knows what it means to be in Tuvalu. I'll stop there for now.
Maina, I think if you would continue speaking now forever, we would all listen to you. It's highly emotional. I visited Tuvalu twice, and I must say it is something. It's really hard for Katharine now to follow and to speak about negotiations, trends, and after this input that you provided. Please stay with us. You all have the possibility to ask questions to the minister that he can answer. And we would go now from what does it mean, what the people from Tuvalu experience, Kati. How is that now incorporated here in the negotiations? We have a loss and damage fund. So there are discussions around how to incorporate climate-induced loss and damage, climate-induced migration and displacement in it. Please, Kati, you follow this closely. Provide us and also give an estimation. Is it good incorporated, medium, or lousy? Yeah, with a clear message. Is there something that we all need to do? Is there justice to the people in Tuvalu? And then I would also hear from the German government how they are supporting the people. Please, Kati.
Thank you very much, and thank you. And as always, it's really not easy to follow up after your insights. And I just want to explain a little bit what it means when we talk. We have listened now to you and specific forms of non-economic loss and damage and human mobility. And I think it is really important to understand that human mobility is, in the context of climate change, is a question of climate mobility injustice. Because those mobilities are mostly of the time forced. And we have this number, then the number of disaster displacement and all other forms of displacements that are just like caused by the direct and indirect effects of climate change are increasing. So disaster displacement has become one of the clearest examples of loss and damage, but we have a lot of other forms of forced mobility. And so they also can result in economic loss and damage. And such, like we already heard, the disruption of livelihood, the loss of cultural heritage. But we also have human rights violations during the process of displacement, life-threatening forms of non-economic loss and damage, such as gender-based violence, the lack of basic services, and also death. So you know that this is highly gendered also. Women and children die 14 times oftener than men in situations of displacement. So, and the other aspect is that a lot of people, and numbers say that 75% of those that are displaced because of this disaster displacement are also displaced because of conflict. So we have this, that conflict and disasters are really entangled, and there is a huge interconnection between those forms of displacement. What does this mean for non-economic loss and damage, and also to measure it and how to make like pledges? So in the context of displacement, also the question of migration status plays such a big role. Yeah, is there access to basic service? What is it with health care? What is it with gender and gender-based health services? The lack of dignified migration pathways. It's really, really important to have this also in mind. Although we are talking here in the context of climate negotiations, the protection gap is still a really important issue we have to address, and this we have to tell this also here. In displacement settings, we also have this that climate change increase inequality, so social conflicts and loss of sense of identity that leads to violence, erosion of social cohesion. So we have a lot of indirect effects of economic loss and damage. Yeah, and this makes it much harder, and such as psychological impacts, stress, trauma, mental health disorders. All those aspects are really difficult to quantify, and we need not only a bottom-up definition how to define this, because this has to come from the affected people. We also have to think about and make really good assessments. How this assessment could look like, this has to be really context-specific and has to take place with the participation of the people. And so you asked me what is happening here within the UNFCCC. Although the rest of the UN, the COP28 was really disconcerting regarding human mobility, a lot is happening. This we can say, we are seeing an emerging architecture of human mobility, and especially displacement has been strongly anchored in the Warsaw International Mechanism of Loss and Damage, and also we have it in adaptation measures. So now, good or bad, we are just in the beginning, and without the integration of really the loss and damage as sub-goal to the new collective quantified goal, there will be just like, we cannot say like good or bad. We need that. We're not financing, because without financing we cannot address this. So this is just like a main thing, and the other things I will leave it for later. But just to give you the thumb.
Thank you so much, Kati. Where we will know at the end of the negotiations if loss and damage is properly incorporated in the new climate finance target goal after 2025. Dear Christina, the German government has been a forefront runner in providing climate finance in the past. And with what we have heard here, but about non-economic loss and damage, it's not all about finance. There are also other instruments needed. And you are working as the head of the unit in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on climate change and peace, conflict, fragility, also in very difficult areas such as Tuvalu, but also in certain parts of the world with very with conflict context. I would like to hear what the German government is doing on tackling non-economic loss and damages and how you are actually helping the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you for the question, and also thank you to the other panelists. It's been very, very interesting to listen to you. I took so many notes. I hope I'll manage to answer to all of these. Sabine, you've mentioned that climate finance is part of it. There's the Green Climate Fund. There's lots of climate finance outside the funds. There's the new Loss and Damage Fund. But I really think that from what's been said only today during the last 20 minutes, you can see that it's also about the negotiations. It looks like we are producing paper, but basically we are also creating international law. So beyond, maybe I'll start with this, beyond UNFCCC and everything that Kati has said, we are working on UNCLOS. We also have the initiative from Vanuatu on international law. And the responsibility of states. We have the discussions in the International Law Commission, and there, for example, Germany has a very clear position on climate change, that climate change cannot be a reason to lose statehood, for example. Even when it comes to the interpretation of UNCLOS, we would say that it cannot be a reason, or it doesn't have to be a reason for countries to change their borders and thus the economic exclusive zones. So this is maybe international law theory, but as we have heard from the minister from Tuvalu, it has very practical consequences. On a very different note, maybe since you have also mentioned this, Minister, I mean, the non-economic losses and damages, they are very concrete and they are very important parts of the pathways when it comes to how climate change actually impacts the real life and the security of people. You've mentioned, Sabine, that we have been very active in this field on the nexus between climate, peace and security. And I must say, sometimes I was very impatient myself. I said, we are doing so much research. Still, when we go to these international meetings, people say, we need more data, we need more research. But I think the more I know about the subject and the more I listen to you also, I have a feeling that this is really crucial, because if we understand the pathway, we know what it's doing to people, that's only then that we can find the right entry points. So I would support the call for more and very concrete research. We have, for example, the Weathering Risk Initiative, where we have also had colleagues working with not small island but big ocean states in the Pacific on their concrete needs and on defining those pathways and thus the entry points. But also our minister has been to the region, our state secretary has been to the region, they have been talking to people and then supporting very concrete initiatives. We have found, for example, that the locally led initiatives are those that are most effective. So within the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund, we have opened a window and seed funded this window on climate action. And we see that, if the women on the ground really take it into their hands, they can maybe reach much more than what we in Berlin or Brussels or New York and the United Nations can do. So this is just a few examples. I'd like to speak more because it's been very interesting what you said, but I don't think we have so much time for all the panelists. So I'll give it back to Sabine.
Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. We still have half an hour, and I would love also to give the audience the possibility to ask questions or to make comments. Do we have a microphone or someone who is supporting us here from the IOM? And I think I've seen a lady. Is there someone here from the IOM pavilion who can help with taking questions from the audience? That would be lovely. Thank you so much. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Say your name and for who you are working, and to if you just want to make a comment, or to who you direct the question. Please, here, and then we have a man here in the front. Please.
Hi, can you all hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Valerie Graw. I am a student from Indiana University in the States. My question for you all is, we talked a lot about culture and kind of incorporating that into international law. How can we ensure that when we do include aspects of culture and identity, that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it incorporates each state's and each country's unique cultural positions on migration? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I collect more. Maybe you can take notes or remember. Yeah, please, you, and then.
Thank you very much, the panelists. I'm Rosina Mbenya from Pelham, Kenya. And my question goes to Tuvalu. I'm interested to know if in your NDCs as a country you have factored in the issues you have mentioned on human rights and economic loss, or are there plans? Because I know the NDCs are the ones which various countries have to develop and really focus for when it comes to issues of climate change. So I'm interested to know how you have factored in that. Thank you.
So to Tuvalu, the question if in the NDCs human rights and loss and damage is incorporated, please.
Okay, hi. Steve Myron from the Refugee Law Initiative, University of London, also for the Minister. The question I have is around really the right to stay and whether Tuvalu can do more to enable people the option of staying in a dignified way. And is finance, international climate finance, an issue there? And if you really want to indulge me, is the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion something that excites you? Could open up new pathways toward, I don't want to use that metaphor, new possibilities of finance and so on.
Is climate finance helpful for Tuvaluans to stay in their country? I have an idea, Mina. I've seen some massive adaptation projects there. Maybe you want to outline that. Are there more questions? Please.
Okay, just a comment. My name is Innocent Domaria. I work with the African Network for Environment and Economic Justice from Nigeria. Just to emphasize that the Tuvalu situation is just a mild situation compared to what we experience in the part of Nigeria, the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, where we have both economic and non-economic losses. Quite similar, but we have a more severe situation where you have a heavy environmental pollution. At some point, flooding also has also resulted in displacement of people from their habitat. Even recently, there have been some severe flooding where people have now moved away from their natural environment and seeking habitation elsewhere and all of that. So just some similarities, and to also emphasize we are facing more complex situation.
Thank you so much, Innocent. And finally, nice to meet you. Are there more questions? Okay, please say your name.
My name is Ilka Vega, and I work with a faith-based organization out of the U.S., United Women in Faith. We're part of U.S. Climate Action Network. Both a little comment and a question. So the comment is, how can we, or it's a rhetorical question kind of comment, how can we really say we can provide the right to stay in a dignified way if the lack of climate ambition is just not allowing, and should that right fall into just one state government to comply and provide their citizens, which is really like the lack of global responsibility in all global countries to show up for it. And the question goes on, I'm from the US-Mexico border, I'm from Texas, and I see every day what the lack of a safe pathway to migration does in terms of the non-economic losses, the loss of life, the loss of dignity when you go through those pathways and you are kidnapped, your children are threatened, you suffer briberies from the government. You go through all those phases of loss and human risk. So what is the Northern Star of what we're asking through the Santiago Network, through the Warsaw mechanism on loss and damage? What is the Northern Star that we should be aiming for to protect the rights of people that have already been displaced?
I thank you so much for your intervention here, especially for what is coming now in your country. And I'm very grateful that you highlighted this here, and I'm sure also that Kati would love to echo this. Thank you so much. Maybe we start with Maina. Is climate finance helping your country?
Well, when it comes to finance, it's always a nightmare for us. The recent panel, I was talking to some of a representative from GCF and a representative from Jeff, and my comment was that when I was a climate activist in the past many years, I always have that thinking around like accessing finance is like going to heaven. And then finally, when I became a politician, I finally realized accessing finance is going to hell. It's so difficult to I can't believe like we are highly impacted, highly affected, and then yet we start looking for money to address some of the issues that we did not cause. Our contribution is almost next to nothing. We don't have factories, we don't have a fortress, and then we're encountering this problem, the climate crisis, the rising seas, and so forth. So accessing finance, and why we are here at COP, we are here because we want finance. We want to address the issue of climate change. And we cannot address climate change through any other means but finance. We need finance that is readily available for our people, for communities like Tuvalu and some other, of course, some remote communities. We need money to address some of the issues. But accessing finance is difficult. It's really difficult for us. By the time we finish filling up all these forms and all these crazy reports, Tuvalu might be underwater already. So yes, of course we need finance, but we really need to remove those red tapes. The right to stay, and of course we have this homegrown initiative called Tuvalu Coastal Adaptation Project, financed by GCF. And I think Tuvalu was the first country in the Pacific to receive the funds through GCF, which is around 36 million USD. And the whole idea of implementing the Tuvalu Coastal Adaptation Project was not just to build seawall, but to reclaim inland, into the ocean, sorry. That was the whole idea, because if we are just to put seawalls, it doesn't work in Tuvalu. Waves are getting much bigger, storm surges, and the intensification of waves and storms, and so we really need to build into the ocean in order for us to protect our people, which is our priority, to protect our people and their properties. That is very important. And of course, with the ICJ, it's an opinion that is not binding, but it's worth to uphold in terms of our advocacy work. But at the end of the day, yes, of course, it's not binding, but it's an opinion that we would love to uphold. It's something there for us to take it forward in terms of climate advocacy work. And yeah, I think those are but in terms of NDCs, yes, we're trying to do our best. We just started the process. Our national consultation has started, and the way we look at into it, and we hope to get more financial support in order for us to develop our own NDC and do some other work around the NDC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Were some questions also that you would like to answer or engage in discussion?
Well, I also wanted to thank you for your contributions and the comments. I think it's very rich and great to hear that from all over the world. People are thinking about, how to move forward. When it comes to the right to stay, I mean, maybe you have heard about the PDD, the Platform for Displacement, and this is a country-led initiative where we both, try to support countries in leaving in a secure way and also being able to stay. This is a focus, and I think also of our climate policy in general. This was also one of your comments, I think, and maybe I should have mentioned this in the beginning. The guiding star, first of all, is the 1.5. It's not a goal, it's a limit. It should have been a limit, and we are at the limit at the moment. And we can adapt as much as we want to and invest into losses and damages when still people are suffering. And we will not, there's a limit to adaptation. So the 1.5 really is the maximum. Still with 1.5, even at 1.3, we had the need to adapt and we had losses and damages. So really, I think the 1.5, it can't be emphasized enough that climate ambition, climate action and mitigation is really what we need as a baseline, so to say. But then also the activities that I mentioned earlier, and also one of the reasons why our special envoy, Climate Envoy Jennifer Morgan, was in the region, also in the Pacific, was to discuss with the countries how to build this resilience, because I think the resilience is a precondition to enable people to stay, so to say. And maybe one more aspect which I think is crucial, and that was also touched upon already, is the humanitarian action that we have been doing so far. I mean, the need is increasing, but the means are decreasing. Unfortunately, it is really a terrible and shocking state we are actually facing, and all the actors are suffering from this. And we would always like to do more. We have a tight budget and even a government that has just split up over a budget fight, actually. So the conditions are not easy, not in our countries, not in other very relevant climate finance donors. But I still think that if we look at these problems and we see how interconnected these crises are, then I think we can and must also address them with really well-integrated answers. So when we address losses and damages, at the same time, we can see for those projects to be peace positive, and for the peace and stabilization work that we do, the migration work that we do, to be climate positive. I think it's really the only way to be more efficient, to work more with anticipatory humanitarian aid, for example. These are really steps where we can actually save lives and also save money, which is we never have enough of. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And I also hope at the end of this negotiations we will see some new innovative finance sources according to the polluter pays principle, who bring justice to the people who are most impacted by climate change and added zero to the problem, such as Tuvalu. Please, Kati, I know that you would like to echo what we just heard from the US, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think you addressed really important points, and this is what we are really discussing: safe passages. What does it mean, migration with dignity? What does it mean to have the right to stay, but also to have the right to move with safety and under the protection of fundamental human rights? So safe passages, labor exploitation, we have the lack of social services, trafficking and drug bondage that we have through labor exploitation, etc. We have so huge numbers of deaths in the Mediterranean and in the deserts. So all those migrants do not fall under the protection of refugees. They are really forced to migrate, and they are without protection. And those challenges are really huge, and it's really difficult to address this within this framework on climate policy. But it is important to do so. And I think that we have those policy gaps. It's those silo discussions that we cannot, or we do not bring together migration policy and climate policy, and we don't do that because of the really toxic environment where we are talking about migration. This has been an issue that we cannot address anymore, and this has to stop. We have to really introduce the question of climate mobility injustice. So where are humanitarian visas? Yeah, we have contradictory policies from external affairs and from development institutions. The other thing is what can we do when we do not have reliable partners? What do we do when we have state and non-state violence? Yeah, all those actors, it is really difficult to look how we can get the assistance and the support to the most affected people on the move. So this is really another huge problem that we have to see. And I think that, of course, the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage can contribute. Yeah, it can, just like in forms of capacity building, etc. But we have to break those silos and really address that protection gap. And this is a huge difficulty, but we have to do it because it's about life or death, as you have just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Kati. I think it's very important to emphasize that we are discussing migration and displacement in a very toxic political environment, and it's the obligation of all of us engaging with our governments in the global north, engaging with our families, engaging with our friends, engaging with whoever we are discussing this to make sure that this toxic environment that we cannot accept and allow it. So, and here climate-induced migration displacement is on top even more unfair because these people don't want to lose and they don't want to leave their homes as we are destroying it, and now we are complaining about it that they are leaving. So, and I've been 3 times in the Pacific. None of these people wanted to move to the European Union. They all want to stay where they are. They want that they reduce our emissions, that we also support them in adaptation, that they're actually not experiencing loss and damage, that they don't have to go. But if worse comes worse, they want to be prepared. That's for sure. Is there another question that you would like to ask? Okay, then I would like to give maybe a one-sentence final intervention as a goodbye and a wrap-up of the session, and also maybe a word what you wish that we continue forward-looking. Please.
Thank you, Sabina. So I think maybe my summary would be there is no one-size-fits-all. I mean, we've seen all these different approaches and different challenges, so it has to be a mosaic of solutions. I think what I wish for, maybe for the coming 10 days or 12, how many do we have left, is really to anchor. I think that's what we can do at UNFCCC, really anchor these challenges in the relevant document, if it's the final decision, but also the structure and the provisions for the funds that I think I heard you rightly, Minister, you said climate finance is a nightmare. I mean, we really have to change this. It shouldn't be a nightmare, it should be a dream. And what we can do within the negotiations is, of course, not the practical work, but it's to anchor or to build the conditions for this, for those who are really vulnerable and affected to benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kati, please. And Mana, you will have the last words. Please, Kati.
Yes, thank you. I think it is important for here and for the ongoing processes, and we have a long way to go. So will be super important to have to enable migrants and refugees to be here. Most of them are without constituency. So this is a huge problem, how to represent the needs. This is not only important to have just like these participation projects, but this is also important for tailored solutions, because those have to be elaborated from the ground and on the ground. And only with that measures, we can also have just like really not only displacement measures for right now in situations of disaster, but also durable solutions that have to be just like we need that assessment, durable solutions, and I think participation will be a key thing also for a change of narratives. And this is a thing that I really want to engage and ask all of you to really change those narratives about migrants and refugees, because not they are a threat, climate change is a threat.
Thank you so much. Maina, what are your forward-looking words, what would you like to see here at the end of the negotiations, for example?
Well, thank you once again. As I said earlier, for us, we want to see finance readily available for us to tap into. And by having that finance readily available without any red tapes, then we can respond systematically to the impact that we are going through, especially in terms of climate change related sea level rise. And I also want to flag this out. We also need to change our perspective towards COP meetings. We should not treat this as a climate festival, but we need to put more energy to our negotiators, the work that they do. We acknowledge that the hard work that they are doing, and we want to see more progress on finance. But we should not continue to treat this as a climate festival at the end of the year, because and sometimes others may tend to romanticize climate change. We should not do that, because it's not romantic to be sinking. It's not romantic to go underwater. And this is serious business. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really thank you all for being here. And once again, as my final word, I would like to thank the government of Tuvalu and the government of Germany, who never said no to an invitation that I made, either Tuvalu or Germany, while a lot of our NGO friends worldwide don't have the possibility to speak up to their governments, who are experiencing shrinking space of civil society spaces, and it will continue, especially this topic, climate-related displacement and refugees migration becomes an even more toxic topic to talk to governments. So thank you very much for your open ears and open hearts. Thank you.